Hi, everybody. This is Professor Alex. I hope all is well. I just wanted to pop in and make a quick recording on chapter 8, which is on media and technology. So, this is kind of a shorter chapter, so let's just get into it. So, again, chapter 8, media and tech, I'm using the open access resource. If you go into Google and you type in Sociology 3E, you can find this textbook for free. Anybody, you don't need to log in. So if you would like to follow along or read the chapter, feel free to do so. So I'm not going to cover everything, but I'm going to cover what's most important in terms of kind of terminology. So first of all, what is technology? Usually when we think of technology, y'all are thinking of electronics. But technology is any sort of application of science to solve a problem. That could be a fork, knife, spoon. That could be toilet paper, paper towels. That could be a sponge. That could be the basics of a wheel or a wedge. Anything that kind of helps you solve a problem. A pencil, a pen, whatever you're using right now to watch this video, a computer, a keyboard, anything like that. So technology is not just electronics. Electronics is more so a subset of technology, but technology could be anything. That could be a way to listen to music. Oh, it could be a textbook. Again, anything that helps you kind of solve a problem. I think of like alarm clocks in the morning, anything like that. So don't limit yourself in terms of the idea of technology. I usually have my classes talk about and reflect on the biggest changes in technology in their life in terms of what's been most impactful. I also like to talk about the positives and negatives of social media, of which there are many, but I'm sure that y'all can kind of reflect on that on your own, and I'm sure you all have some positives and negatives. Of course, it helps us connect with people, but at the same time, it also creates disconnection between people. So it's kind of a catch 22 a little bit, right? It's easy to talk to people that you typically wouldn't be able to talk to, whether that's family across the country or in another country, or whatever, making new friends in communities that are specific to your interests. Another cool thing about technology is you can find passions or new hobbies that you weren't introduced to in your own life. You can also meet people that you never would have met in your own life or find ideas or inspiration. So lots of positives of social media, but also some negatives, of course. This is the most important part of this chapter: knowledge gap, e-readiness, and digital divide. I would, I wish I could kind of reorder this. I feel that in my head, how I kind of think about it is e-readiness, digital divide, and then the knowledge gap is the result of e-readiness and the digital divide. So I kind of wish that knowledge gap was at the bottom here, but that's all right. But so e-readiness is how well you've been trained and how well you understand using specifically electronic technology. This is writing an email. This is being able to set up a Zoom meeting. This is being able to access and navigate Canvas. This is being able to use Google Scholar to find research that is relevant for you. In general, being able to understand and use electronic technology. This also refers to being able to decipher misinformation and disinformation, being able to nowadays decipher, is that real or is that AI? So as we go through time and as tech evolves, we have to develop even more e-readiness and more depth of that, because it's very easy to kind of get persuaded by disinformation or misinformation, especially when it's in those little bite-size TikToks or shorts. It's really easy to kind of just believe things as we see them. And so part of e-readiness is being ready to decipher the difference between fact and opinion. And it also would be, I was thinking, again, with AI, being able to recognize AI, which is increasingly difficult. So that's something that going forward, I foresee us having more training in as the barrier between AI and real life becomes more convoluted. Also, you could say e-readiness is knowing how to use like Grammarly, knowing how to use Adobe, PowerPoint, Word, Google Slides, Google Docs, being able to kind of communicate that way. and also knowing how to use ChatGPT in a responsible way. So there's a lot of things that go into e-readiness. When I was a kid, it was mostly just how to do a Google search and how to type correctly on a keyboard, but it has developed a lot further than that now. So it's interesting. Digital divide refers to the uneven access of technology based on race, class, and geography. There are stark differences when it comes to race, class, and geography. So, for example, we have here that about 25% of Black and Hispanic Latinx people rely on cell phones to access the internet rather than maybe having a computer at home. And I think, if you've ever had that experience where you're trying to fill out an application on your phone and you get frustrated and you move over to your computer, that's what a lot of us do. There's a lot of forms that are long and lengthy and need uploads, and those can be really difficult to do on your phone alone. Having a computer, access to a computer, is really important and can add ease to certain processes. This could also refer to not having access to the internet. So 78% of US households have access to the internet, talking about Wi-Fi or even just a library where you can access internet. Whereas when we look at rural and low income areas, only 68% have internet access. This is going to create a divide in knowledge, right? If you have people who have easy access to the internet and you can just go on your phone and Google something and have the answers in your hand or at your laptop, you have more access to knowledge, period. And so, therefore, the knowledge gap refers to the difference in information that we have based on e-readiness and the digital divide. In terms of geography, you got to think where I live right now, I live in the city. I could go in any direction, and within 2 miles, there will be a library. I think there's at least 6 libraries near me. So if I didn't have access to a computer or Wi-Fi, I could, even without a car, hop on a bus and be at a library within 20, 25 minutes. If you're in a rural area, your closest library might be an hour away. So even though we like to say, oh, just go to a library, if you live in a more rural area, that might be more difficult than someone who lives in a more urban or suburban area. I also think about time poverty when it comes to this in terms of, hey, if you're more affluent or in a more urban area, having access to a computer and to Wi-Fi and to a library is, again, more accessible. Whereas if you're more so low income or in a rural area, going to use a computer, again, might take you an hour to get to the library, fill out your application, an hour back. And that's when we get into time poverty, right? So time poverty refers to the fact that when you are low income, certain tasks that take other people a few seconds or a few minutes might take you an hour or two. Another example of time poverty would be people who have in-home washer and dryers versus people who have to go to a laundromat to do their laundry. Somebody who has an in-home washer or dryer, doing the laundry can be a background task. You throw it in and you can get other things done while you're waiting on your laundry. Whereas again, if you have to go to a laundromat, you probably need to find a way there. And a lot of people actually end up staying at the laundromat so that your clothes don't get stolen. And so it ends up being this whole task that takes a few hours versus people at home who have that on washer and dryer. It's kind of more so back of the mind, might take, 20 minutes max to do your laundry. So you can kind of apply that to the digital divide as well in terms of access and how for some people filling out an application might take a few hours, including travel, and other people, you just kind of come home and you do that on your computer. So that's digital divide. And again, that's going to lead to a knowledge gap. Really, don't overthink it just in terms of people who have access to Wi-Fi and to the internet and who are e-ready and can decipher misinformation from fact, from research, from opinion. There's going to be a difference in knowledge. And therefore, there is a knowledge gap based on gender, not so much gender actually, but definitely race, class, and geographic lines. Not really an established difference for gender, but definitely for race, class, and geography. If we move on to constant contact, the research is interesting here. So we see that constant communication increases our level of attachment And as you all know, it increases your responsibility to be accessible because we all have phones in our hands. I'm sure you've all had that moment where you text somebody and they haven't responded all day, and you're like, I know that they're on their phone, right? So that can definitely mess with relationships and the way that we conceptualize relationships and the expectations that we have with relationships, right? If you're like, well, I know my friend's off work and that they're just at home right now, why aren't they answering me? Again, we have this kind of expectation of constant contact. Um, so we see that, instant messaging in any way increases level of attachment, but also it decreases the quality of the relationship. People rate their relationships as weaker or less satisfying when it is dominated by text messages instead of in person or voice communication. We also see that friends who rely heavily on mobile devices have more issues, again, regarding overdependence, especially when there's different expectations about communication, right? So again, I might text my sister and she doesn't answer me for 24 hours, and I might be sitting here kind of offended because I know that she's constantly on her phone. I know that you're on TikTok. Why aren't you watching my TikTok videos? I just sent you three funny ones. You're not going to respond. Like, I know that you're on TikTok right now. I just saw you post a video. So we can definitely have some issues when you have different expectations with communication. I make sure that my friends know you don't owe me a response right away by any means. Like if you are enjoying your day and you don't want to be on your phone, or if you want to be on your phone but you don't feel like responding or having a conversation right now, that's your free time. Like please, like I don't let me be the one to stress you out. I think that having this constant contact is quite unnatural, especially just historically how humans have communicated. This is a very new phenomenon, this constant contact. I even think about like back in the day, even when I was a kid, if we wanted to go to the playground, we'd say, Dad, we're to go to the playground, and he'd be like, all right, be back in 2 hours. We didn't have cell phones. He couldn't call us, right? Like it was just go to the playground, be safe, and come back in a couple hours. Or, back in the day, if you wanted to go to a friend's house, your mom might call the other mom and be like, all right, like my daughter's coming over, and the mom, I remember my parents were always like, I want permission from the parent and I want to talk to them and know what's going on. There might be a conversation between parents, but once you got there pre-cell phone, you were there and you had to be back at 8 p.m. or before the street lights went out, right? And there wasn't this constant contact. I remember we kind of had more freedom with friends before cell phones, and then after cell phones, I remember my mom would be blowing us up. Where are you at? What are you doing? When are you to be home? So even kids in kind of developing that autonomy about and responsibility of communicating where they're going and when they'll be back, that's changed because we have this constant contact. And then we also see, as I've kind of mentioned, there's more elements of guilt and pressure to respond, which we call, or at least this researcher Hall called entrapment. And I think that's a funny word to use because it's very aggressive, but also fitting, right? You do feel entrapped sometimes. Sometimes I get, uh, I wake up sometimes with a bunch of texts and I don't, I get overwhelmed and I don't want to answer any of them, when I have all these texts from different people. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, let me shut my phone. I can't even handle this right now. It can be overwhelming, right? So we call that entrapment. And recently my aunt texted me, I think just a song, and for some reason, the idea of listening to the song and responding about the song felt like too much to me. I was like, I cannot. And then 4 days go by and I feel bad because all she did was send me a song. And why can't I just listen to a 3-minute song? So there's kind of that sense of guilt there where I'm like, it was just a song. Why couldn't I listen to it? But I just didn't feel like it. And I didn't, you know what I mean? So it can be this feeling of entrapment, which can bring guilt as well, right? And then when we get into kind of privacy and data collection, most people, 81% of people, feel like they have little control over the data collected by companies, also by the government. A lot of people felt it wasn't possible to go through the day without having their data collected by the government or electronics, even if that's, people who are like series listening all the time. I hear people be like, well, I was talking about this and then I got ads about this the next day. So a lot of people are concerned about data collection. But what's funny, on the other hand, I've had a student who, when we were talking about this in class, he had said, when they ask you about cookies, reject all. Um, but do we do that? It's almost easier to just click accept all or accept necessary cookies, right? Sometimes you can't even access what you want to access if you don't click accept all cookies. So we know that they're collecting our data and we're giving them permission to do so, but I also feel like we don't feel like there's much of an option. There are ways to kind of get around that, but you have to put more thought and time into that. And a lot of us are, it's just easier to click accept, accept, and move on. So of course we're worried about our data being collected. And I don't think that in terms of e-readiness, we have really learned. I mean, maybe people in middle school, high school now are learning this, but I didn't because we didn't have this issue when I was a kid. We had dial-up internet. Um, I don't think that we've really learned or have been trained how to deal with cookies, what that means, how to even clear them out maybe at the end of the day. But that's something that I foresee becoming a part of e-readiness. In terms of children, right? We've seen some moves here. Like I know that for TikTok now, you need to, if you're under 18 or under 16, you need to kind of have permission or an association or affiliation with a parent. I'm thinking about like Northwest at the top of that TikTok page. It says ran by Kim Kardashian, right? Like you have to indicate that a parent is running that content. I think that Instagram now has a version of Instagram that is for people under the age of 16, where I think one of the things is random people can't message you. And I think that certain content might be blocked or altered if you are under 16. So we do see changing policies here. But at the end of the day, we still have an issue with privacy in children. I don't even want to get started on family YouTubers or YouTubers who are posting their children. Um, I don't want to just an opinion, you know what I mean, is that especially with AI and deep fakes, if you're posting a video of your kid, someone can upload that, make a weird deep fake, make some sort of AI content. And I think that we've also seen that a lot of the times when people are posting their children, their viewers tend to be older men, is what I've seen in terms of the demographic analysis of who's actually consuming that material, where you would hope it would be other mothers, but it tends to be older men who are consuming, saving that type of content of young children. Um, I don't even want to get deeper into it than that. Like you do you, it's your kid, you're the parent, just make sure that you're being responsible. But it is creepy what happens on the internet nowadays, and we need to be aware of that. And I do foresee us hopefully getting stricter on laws and policies surrounding children and on social media. Um, I think there's a difference between kind of posting your family life and then using your kids to make an income. But, I don't have kids, so I can't really say much. In terms of disruptive technology, this term is a little misleading. When we're saying disruptive, we don't mean anything negative. We just mean that it disrupted the way that we used to do things. I have a bunch of examples here. First of all, from a younger audience, if you probably don't know this or don't remember, Netflix started as a DVD service. You would sign up and you would make a subscription. There was three tiers of subscriptions. You could either get one video at a time, two DVDs at a time, or three DVDs at a time. And you would queue up your DVDs. They would send you, let's say two. You would watch them, send them back. And when you sent them back, you would get the next two that were in your queue of the DVDs that you wanted. So they were literally just sending us DVDs. You would send them, get back, and get more. And nowadays it's streaming. Everything is streaming, right? Like you just get a subscription to a service and you can watch whatever's on that service. So streaming was disruptive to things such as Blockbuster, which I'm sure a lot of you don't remember, but Blockbuster was like an actual store that you went to and you would pick out DVDs and you would rent them and then you would bring them back. I forget if you had like a week or something like that. and you would bring them back. And I remember it was really fun. My sister would go in and it'd be this huge store of DVDs and you could search around and pick things out. But then Netflix comes out and they send you the DVDs, and that starts to harm Blockbuster as a company. And then we see streaming, and streaming was disruptive to cable TV. Who needs cable TV anymore? I think mostly older people have cable TV, right? Why would we need cable if we can get Peacock, Netflix, Hulu, Prime, Crunchyroll, whatever? You can almost choose your content, and it's a lot cheaper to have a subscription, 12.99 a month to Hulu versus 100 something for cable. And back in the day with cable, and I'm sure it's still this way, is you would get like general cable, but if you wanted like AMC or HBO or any of those types of channels, you'd have to pay extra money. So streaming has really replaced cable, and it's replaced things like Blockbuster. I remember back in the day when I was a kid, if you wanted to get Wi-Fi from Xfinity or Verizon or whatever, they would make you do a bundle of cable and Wi-Fi. And it was really frustrating because you're like, I don't want cable. I had Verizon people come to my door the other day and I was like, are y'all going to make me bundle with cable? And they were like, no, we don't do that anymore. And I was like, thank God, because who needs cable? And I was able to get Wi-Fi standalone. But back in the day, that was not possible. So whatever. So we could say that streaming was disruptive to DVDs, VHSs, which is disruptive to Blockbuster. And I even think about like music as well, right? Like back in my day, we would have to, I feel so old, oh my God, but I would actually go to a store called FYE, which was for your entertainment, and I would pick out and go and buy the newest CD. And that was how I was consuming music, other than the radio, right? If I wanted to listen to specific music, I had to go and buy the CD. And so when I first got a car, there was no Bluetooth, there was no aux cord. We had CDs on rotation. We would burn CDs for each other and make not mixtapes, but we would burn each other's CDs with our favorite songs. And we would do that. And that was it. And now we have aux cords and we have Bluetooth and we have Spotify and we have Apple Music, right? So we don't need to buy CDs anymore. And so that kind of put stores like FYE out of business. We don't need to go and buy the CDs anymore. Some people do for nostalgia, the same way that when I play video games, I like to buy the actual game just for nostalgic reasons. I like having the case. Um, I like knowing that if my console broke, I still have the CD and I don't need to re-download it or re-buy it on a new console. So there are some benefits. But nowadays, if we're getting CDs or DVDs or games that are physical, it's mostly for nostalgic reasons, but not because we need it, because it's much easier to just like download a movie from Prime or download music from Apple Music or Spotify or whatever. So we see even yeah, and I used to have LimeWire as a kid, which was like an illegal music downloading thing. And so, when I didn't want to buy the CD, or if I just wanted a few specific songs, or if I wanted to burn a CD for my friend, I would use LimeWire. And the thing about LimeWire is you could get any music for free, but it came with a lot of um, what am I trying to like viruses, right? It was like an illegal service, so you would get these like weird viruses, and it wasn't good for the computer. It would crash. But so whatever. So we had, we had used to have even before me cassette tapes, and then we had CDs, which was disruptive to cassette tapes, and then we had, stores we could buy these things at. And then we had, streaming services, which was disruptive to stores that sold CDs. I'm even thinking about records, right? Like we used to have records. No one gets records anymore. It's inconvenient, but we still sell them because of nostalgia, right? People like just kind of the vibe of having a record player. And I know the music sounds like a little bit different, and it's kind of more so like a vibe. You know what I mean? It's a vibe to have a record player. Like I know my sister has one, but it's not her main way that she listens to music. But it's cute to have in your room, and it's cute to get the records with the cute covers. So when we kind of use those older things, it's mostly nostalgic, but realistically, record stores are largely out of business. They're kind of niche now. Even I sometimes go to like retro video game stores to try to find the old actual like physical game. But whatever, that kind of ended, whatever. Whatever, what I'm trying to say is that when we use those older mediums, it's mostly nostalgic, but we have much better and more efficient ways to do things. And that's disruptive technology. It's just the way that, you know, records replaced cassettes and then, or the other way around. Was it records or cassettes first? I'm not sure. But then we had CDs, which was disruptive to tapes, and then we had, Apple Music, which was disruptive to CDs. And so that's what I mean by disruptive technology. Right. Record stores went away, music companies changed, new providers emerged, streaming changed things again. We don't need to purchase our music, we stream it. I remember last thing when I was a kid, another thing that y'all probably didn't have to do was when Apple Music first came out, or really was iTunes, I used to always, I love music, so I used to always ask for like Christmas and my birthday for an iTunes gift card. And it would be like 25 bucks. And that meant that I could go onto iTunes and pick out certain songs or music video that I wanted. So I remember songs were 99 cents and music videos were 2.99. And I remember I would sit there all night and strategically plan out how I was going to spend this $25. Because realistically, with $25, that's like, 18 songs and a few music videos versus now we can go onto Apple Music and search up any song that we want. So that's what I mean by disruptive technology. Um, Not super important, but they were making a point here about Grand Theft Auto and talking about how, there's kind of that argument of, oh, well, this game makes kids more violent. But realistically, there's more of a correlation here. We don't know if it's that violent kids seek out more violent video games or if violent video games cause kids to be more violent. We don't have evidence really either way. We're kind of stuck at a correlation where we don't know which way it is. There's one study that said people who commit violence are more likely to play violent video games. There's probably also been papers that say that, violent people with violent tendencies are more likely to, well, yeah, people who commit violence are more likely to play violent video games. And there probably might be some evidence that violent video games encourage violent activities as well. But realistically, at the end of the day, it's a correlation. We don't know if violent people like violent games or if violent games create violent people. I'm sure it's a mix of both. In terms of the attention economy, kind of is what it sounds like in terms of kind of grabbing people's attention, specifically for like advertisements, right? Back in the day when we had cable, we were forced to sit through commercials. And this is kind of coming back. Like I just had to the other day, I pay for Amazon Prime, right? And I've never had ads on Prime before. The other day I'm on Prime and all of a sudden there's an ad before my movie and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, oh yeah, you want the ad free? Pay $2.99 more a month. Are you kidding me? Like, that's why we have the streaming services, so we don't have to deal with the ads. But so it's interesting because we kind of surpassed the ads with our streaming, Hulu, Netflix, Prime. And then now they found a way to make more money off of it where they're like, well, if you want ad free, you got to pay more money here. So it's kind of interesting the resurgence of ads and how we're trying to push ads. But of course, with the internet, well, yeah, like with TV and with streaming, we can pay for there to be no ads. But when we're on our mobile games or we're on social media, it's really hard to avoid them. A lot of the time we can skip through them, but a lot of the time you're forced to watch, I'm thinking about YouTube, you have to watch the first 10 seconds of the ad before you can skip it. But so people are becoming more creative in the ways that ads are portrayed or shown. And of course, sometimes they're intuitive. Sometimes ads are so intuitive, we think that our phones are listening to us. Are they? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not even going to try to answer that. But at the end of the day, they are looking at our algorithm. They are looking at what we like. They are looking at what we share to our friends, what our friends share to us, and they use that information to make ads specific to us that would be more relevant to us. And then even deeper, we have brand ambassadors, right? And a lot of the times we're able to be like we know that that's an influencer, right? Like we know that that's an influencer and they're making their money based off ads. So when I see influencers doing ads or showing products, we know, I think we're in terms of e-readiness, I think we're pretty informed and aware that that product might not be that great, but that influencer is being paid to promote that product. So they're going to, and they're probably going to lie, they're probably going to exaggerate. I was listening to a podcast, a true crime podcast that I listen to a lot, and Skims was one of the advertisers or whatever funders, I don't know what you call it. And the girl in the podcast, the woman, she was talking about, oh yeah, like I love my Skims. I wear Skims all the time. Actually, I wear Skims every single day. I can't live without my Skims. And you're kind of like, there's no way. Like, there's no way that you wear Skims every single day. Like, I love Skims too, and it's great, but like, all right, let's be so for real. So I think we kind of know when people are trying to sell something, and I think we're pretty aware of that. But at the end of the day, if you have an influencer that you really, really like and you really trust, that ad is gonna work on you more, or you might be more influenced by that person. So it's interesting. I think the big shift here is that we're going from the actual like brand themselves telling you to buy it to someone that you might actually trust and admire telling you to buy it, right? If we see an ad for Verizon, we're like, oh, okay, okay, Verizon, like whatever, screw it. But then if we have an influencer that you really love who's like, oh my God, Verizon's way better than Xfinity, like I really suggest this, and it's someone that you trust and think makes good recommendations, you may be more likely to get Verizon. So whatever, I'm just saying that we are able to kind of understand when there's ads with influencers, but if there's an influencer that you really like and respect, that might actually work on you. In terms of fragmentation, this is, so it says here, with cable and online news or social media, people increasingly customize their news experience, minimizing their opportunity to encounter information that does not align with their worldview. There's a lot of ways to put this. We can call this fragmentation. I sometimes call it an ideological bubble, which can lead to digital tribalism, which is the tendency to gather and reinforce ideas that you believe in, which is also called confirmation bias, right? So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of talk about this same idea, but fragmentation is how social media will customize to you and your interests. That in turn can lead to us being in an ideological bubble where our own ideas are being reinforced to us, which can also be digital tribalism, which is where we kind of go back to the same sources that we find to be trustworthy rather than exploring multiple sources. And this has to do also with confirmation bias, which is where we look for things to confirm our own beliefs, ideals, values, etc. So we want to be careful of that because you all know we call it the algorithm. We all have our own algorithm, and it's going to feed us exactly what we want to hear from exactly who we want to hear it from sources that we believe to be better, and from people that we tend to trust and believe in. And you got to think when you look at your social media, you're probably getting views from, let's just even think politics. If you're Democratic, you're going to get videos that are more liberal. The politicians you're to see are going to be more Democratic. The ideas that you see are going to be more liberal. Whereas if you're Republican, you're going to see more content from Trump and from other Republicans and ideas that follow that kind of political affiliation. So we are fed back what we believe in and what we interact with, right? Um, Another idea that's important to consider is a monopoly. So you can think of this from the game Monopoly, right? A situation where there's only one individual organization without competitors providing a particular good or service. So here we see that there are really six main like organizations that run everything or that own everything, right? And so just keep in mind that there's going to be biases here because these companies are all essentially stemming from the same major six companies who therefore have control over the content that is being produced and shown and the way that that content is being produced and shown. Another thing that I think is important, and I think this is probably our last slide, is net neutrality. This is another thing that I think going forward, I foresee being a part of e-readiness. I feel like, again, I feel like the computer classes and elementary, middle, and high school are going to have to be more robust to deal with all of these issues. But net neutrality means that no internet-based service or content should have special treatment, and there should be guided internet usage from its inception. And so in 2015, we had legislation on net neutrality that kind of barred services from overwhelming and taking over internet traffic and media and advertising. But the Trump administration in 2017 actually repealed net neutrality, therefore allowing some, organizations, or I'm thinking about like, major companies like this to have more of an influence over what we see it, how we consume it, when we consume it. So this is something definitely to consider going forward. And one of the consequences is that wealthier individuals, like the people who work at and run these companies, will have faster, smoother internet access than less wealthy individuals. And this is because of like think about I'm trying to like how to explain this. So when they repealed net neutrality, it reversed legislation that barred service providers from blocking or throttling internet traffic or creating paid fast lanes. So think about it like when you have more money, you can, for example, pay on Prime or on Netflix or on Hulu to not have the ads. Or if you're playing a game on your phone, you might have the money to pay that $5.99 for it to be ad free. Or like things like that, where you can pay to avoid certain traffic and inconvenience when we're using electronic technology. And if you have that money, you can surpass those ads, which is going to, first of all, increase the ease and efficiency of you accessing certain information. And it's going to take away some of that distraction of, again, ads and influencers and different even like propaganda that might pop up. So again, if you have money, you can kind of surpass those things. And if you don't, it might be a little bit more difficult and you might be more prone to seeing certain propaganda or ads or ideas pushed where you can't, pay to get rid of it. So whatever. So we see that this kind of benefits wealthier individuals in terms of their internet access and what they're seeing, as well as the fact that um, net neutrality was supposed to stop certain businesses and companies from having special treatment, but repealing that makes it so that, again, our major companies can kind of have special treatment and be shown more and be pushed more than other smaller companies that don't have as much money or power. So with that, again, if you would like to go check out the textbook, you can go on Google and look up Sociology 3E textbook to learn more about this. But of course, as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put those in the comments. You can also email me or inbox me on YouTube, as well as at my professional email, which would be, or I guess my personal one, which would be arodestelle1@gmail.com. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Also, feel free to put them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer those as soon as possible. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that that was helpful, and I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening.